Is your job search stuck? Maybe you're not getting any interviews with employers. Or maybe you are, but no job offers. Or you may be new and not even know where to start. This is Charles Max Wood, and I'm releasing a new course and ebook on how to find a job as a software developer. The course walks you through the process of finding the types of companies you want to work for, getting their attention, and putting your best foot forward as the candidate they want. I've coached dozens of developers in looking for jobs and have been able to help several people find jobs within 2 weeks to 2 months. So whether you're new to development, can't find a great job that fits what you want, or are looking for remote work from an area without a strong tech community, I can help. Go to getacoderjob.com and sign up today. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of My JavaScript Story. This week we're talking to one of our co-hosts, or one of our panelists on JavaScript Jabber, AJ O'Neill.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Uh-oh, you didn't start with yo. What are we going to do?
Well, it's not JavaScript Jabber, and I'm the guest. I can't come on as the guest and be like, yo. I mean, that's pretentious.
Fine. All right, so do you want to just give a brief introduction, who you are, what you do?
Gosh, that's like the hardest thing in the whole world to do. A brief introduction to who I am. I'd say I'm a quirky, goofball type of person who is super ADD and really interested in understanding how things work and why. And a lot of what drives me in technology is trying to figure out ways of like self-hosting or owning or DIYing. Like I'm really into that.
Mm-hmm.
And
where are you working these days?
Well, right now I work in Salt Lake at a place called Big Squid, and they're kind of like you could think of it as almost like an extension for Domo or Tableau or Click. So those companies help you get your data together and kind of like filter it and organize it so that you have a clean set of data to look at and to be able to visualize. And what we do at Big Squid is take that data that has already gone through. I mean, we also do CSV uploads and Excel uploads as well, but typically it's, larger sets of data that have already had somewhat of an eye go through to narrow it down a little bit to like, this is what's important. And then we help you narrow that down further to this is how these things relate to one another and provide prediction models for, say, if you change the price of the product because you find that the price is highly correlated to user retention or whatever, if you tweak that number, how is that going to change in relationship to the other numbers? Right. So it basically data mining / machine learning / AI, but not AI like self-driving car, like looking at the data and using heuristics to get at better data for you.
Gotcha.
And then I have my own company as well that I am working on to the end of being able to have a consumer-friendly home server.
Nice. Yeah, and I think we've talked about that at some length between the two of us, but I think it's also come up on the show some. So is there a place people can go check that out, or is it not ready for human consumption yet?
Well, the things that are ready for consumption, there's primarily 2 products that we have, which the first is, and they're both Node right now at least. One of them I want to move in another direction for efficiency purposes for certain parts of it. Parts I still want to keep in Node. But Greenlock.js is a Let's Encrypt client. We have one for the browser as well as that integrates with Node and Express and basically anything that you're doing in Node. You could even use it on a mail server, anything that uses TLS. And then the other thing is called Telebit, and that is a remote access tool. So you install it on your computer and you get a domain name. And when you access that domain name, you actually have an encrypted connection from the browser to the device that you've installed it on. It does go through a relay. The purpose of this is to have basically progressive decentralization. And so the first step is we just need to get devices connected. So it does go through a relay, but the relay doesn't know what the data is. It just sees a TLS header that tells it a domain name, and then it knows what device that's connected and authenticated on the back end to forward that data to. So you can serve a web browser from a Raspberry Pi inside of a dorm room, or or something like that. Or what's really great for is if you work with people and you want to be able to go back and forth a little bit on something you're developing, whether it's API or front end or whatever, just being able to, give them a domain and say, hey, hit this endpoint, or hey, look at what I'm working on. So it's got a lot of application in the education and or like pair working type of scenario.
Very cool. This episode or this show is more focused on your story about getting into code, but it's interesting to kind of see where you're at, and then we can kind of backfill and let people know how you got there.
Okay.
So let's back up and talk about how you got into programming.
Oh, let's see.
A long, long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. I was in middle school. So first of all, we have to go back further than that. My grandmother was working as a secretary at the Pentagon or administrative assistant of some sort. She was working on getting people paid, like getting people's checks processed. And I think if I recall correctly, she said there was a pretty high error rate, like between 5 and 10% of the time, there'd be a typo or a mistake or something. And people would have to come in and say, my paycheck is incorrect or the wrong numbers on it or something. And because at that time it was all done by hand. And so she wrote a program to help assist with that so there'd be fewer errors. So she got into computers, ended up being some sort of administrator at some point. She no longer even knew what she did anymore. She was like, I don't know, I just answer a bunch of emails. But she kind of went through the ladder and went up and up and up, and part of that was technology, programming, and networking for her. Because of that, she had a computer at home.
Right.
So I started playing games like Fisher-Price School Bus, and there was some T-Rex game. Those two in particular, I remember I just loved to play. She programmed a command so I could type something like games, and then it would come up with a menu of the games that were installed. And so I could hit like 1, 2, or 3. And she actually wrote that herself. It was
nice.
Visual Basic or something, or not Visual Basic, Basic or QBasic or something like that. And I was just fascinated by computers. When I got into middle school, I found one of probably her old BASIC books that she had passed down to my dad that my dad didn't take much interest in, because she bought my dad a computer for his lawn care business to be able to manage his clients and stuff. And he didn't really get super into it. But so some of that material landed to me, and I started to learn a little bit of BASIC. And then I did a roundup in the neighborhood where there was a couple of people that had DOS computers. So like imagine, the stereotypical scene of a child walking through, semi-rural suburbia with a red wagon, knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, do you have any old junky computers?" That's what I did. Like I literally unloaded like 2 or 3 computers from people that I found in the neighborhood that like somebody told me, "Oh yeah, my dad's got an old computer," or just like knocked on a couple random doors asking people if they had an old computer. And so I started taking them apart and putting them together and letting out some of the magic smoke, because back then you could do things like
that too. Yeah.
We did not everything was either like now today everything's either like it's permanent on the circuit board or it's attached via USB. And back then you had like cables and stuff inside a computer. I mean, I guess like gaming systems, you still have some, but it's not the same. And so I learned that that the red wire has to go into pin 1. And if you put it upside down, the hard drive will never work again. I learned that at an early age. Probably the first porn that I ever saw was in 16 colors as I was inserting like a 5 1/4 floppy, and it had a demo folder on it, and I opened up the demo folder and it had like 4 pictures in there to just show like how capable the graphics card was. And so I discovered that mistakenly. And when I went to high school, I was really fortunate, just super lucky, being in the right area.
Uh-huh.
I got into a technical program that was focused on aviation. But the reason I went was because in order to get into the aviation program, you had to take these computer classes continually.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I ever saw Linux was one of the teachers had it installed. And I mean, like, other than asking what's that, I didn't get into it. But then when I moved, I got into another technical program at the next high school. Again, just happened to be super lucky. And this was even a better program. It was focused explicitly on computers. And it was, so I was in Virginia. I don't remember if it was Denby, I think was the high school I went to there. And then there's Essex Center for Technology in Vermont that I went to. And I had this teacher, Mr. Gunter. Is it Gunter or Gunther? I don't remember, but I'd ask him questions and he'd look at me like, what, are you stupid? And say, I don't know, Google it. Kind of a, goofy way, but it was really helpful, because if I asked him a valid question, like one that I wouldn't find in 3 seconds by typing it in on Google, he'd coach me. But if I asked him something that was like he knew was obvious, he'd be like, well, did you try typing that into Google? And that had a lot of help from him in learning. And that was an IT program. I had my own IT business. I made some cards. Friends would tell me about a problem they were having with a computer at home. I'd say, here, give this to your mom. And then, their mom or dad would call me up and I'd go over it. That's how I got my date money. I worked at the supermarket to pay my car insurance. But then the superfluous money was from doing these side jobs once or twice on weekends.
Gotta love the side hustle.
Yeah. And I've always been that way. Even before computers, I was trying to do stuff. And then I got a job that's where I started to learn Linux, because he was big on Linux, that teacher was. And I basically quit doing the assigned work, because he had told us a deal that if we passed the exam, we'd get an A for the year. I don't know, somewhere in the first quarter of the year, I stopped doing all the work and just focused on prepping for the exam. It was A+. And then I passed the exam before the first semester was over, got my A for the year, started learning Linux. Then they came back to me later and said, actually, we didn't think that anyone would pass the final exam within the first 2 quarters. So there's a problem. Kind of legally, we can't not have you doing something. So we're just going to have you take the second year of the program. And now you're going to have to pass that exam to get your A for the year.
Right.
So I waited until like the last 2 weeks of school, got my Network Plus exam done, because that was super easy after all the Linux stuff and all the Windows stuff and everything with the A+. The week after school ended, I got my Linux Plus. So I graduated high school with a lot of technical knowledge and was way underpaid for a job that I was way overqualified for, but was happy as a clam, because if you're in high school, you don't know that. And, you're just so lucky to get paid, $10 an hour to do work that someone else might get paid $20 or $30 an hour.
Yeah.
But, you get to work on what you love. So my official title that I got was at another high school. Somebody had referred me and said, hey, I know they're looking for a tech guy over at this high school. Go check it out and apply there. So I did. And my official title was like AV monitor or AV dude. But I actually was the network technician there. Like, I imaged all machines. I got everything like smooth and running. Like within my first couple of months, I'd solved all the problems that they had where, like computers were getting viruses or, images weren't consistent between different labs. So I got all that consistent. And then I automated a solution to do what my job, like my primary official job was, which was to make sure that the TVs went to the right room at the right time. I got some PHP software that somebody had put up and installed it on a server in the school. And it was Meeting Room Booking System, MRBS was the name of the project. So I edited the code, and that was like my first it didn't become a contribution to open source, but it was my first edit of an open source project. Was I just changed the name to be like Audiovisual Equipment Booking System. And I, went through a bunch of different files and changed that and gave it to the teachers so they could sign up and reserve what was supposed to be rooms. But instead I named the room like TV1, TV2 and stuff like that. And so then I had nothing to do because I'd solved all the problems and had automated my job away. And so I got to sit and learn PHP pretty much every day, all day, except that a couple times a day I'd have to go move a TV from one room to another.
Mm-hmm.
Am I rambling on too long about this, or you still want to hear
No,
more?
it's definitely interesting, and it's funny because it's so many people that I've talked to for this show and other shows. I've probably done a couple hundred interviews for the My Story shows, and what's funny is they all have either I went to school and I found it, which is pretty much the minority at this point, or it's I was fiddling with it, and then somebody started paying me to do it, and then I had a problem. I found a solution, and then I just did it for my free time. And so I think it's interesting just to see, you kind of engineered your way around to be able to spend more time on programming.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I got started learning. And there's a couple cool stories I have from that time that maybe I'll gloss over for now, but I could come back to if we have extra time once I go through some of your other questions. But I got involved with some user groups, found out about those. I was searching the next questions, and I found like an answer that was from someone in Vermont that was like close by at a university. And it turns out there was a group. And so I found out about that. Then I left for 2 years and lived in Albania. I was doing a service mission for my church. Then when I came back from that, it was actually a little jarring because before I left, I was involved in all these projects and, I'd been learning all this stuff, and I didn't really do much with computers for that 2 years. I mean, I snuck some service work like at the library and things like that in every once in a while as I could. And, every once in a while I'd have a conversation with someone, because there were a couple people that we met with and taught about the gospel that also were interested in computers. So I was super excited to just like talk with them about that, and that like helped us build an authentic relationship. I loved learning Albanian. I loved learning the language, and it was cool to learn the computer words. I learned a lot of computer words and a lot of cooking words. So I would say I was earlier on than most people. I was capable of like building more authentic relationships because of that passion that drove me. And, I wanted to even be able to talk about it in a language I didn't understand that well at the time. But I came back, I started going to school at BYU, and they have a great computer science program. I think that it's pretty well known across the country that it's a great school, especially for computer science, along with a couple other majors that they do really well. Accounting is one of them. So I took a couple classes there, and that just like accelerated my learning by at least 10x, if not 100x. User groups were super important. I found out, I continued to get back into the user group scene and do like the on-campus meetups with other students, but also went off campus to meet with other people that were doing at their business locations, hosting meetups. But getting that formal education to learn, just my 101 class was there was like a 101 and 102. One of them was about hardware. Mostly it was like assembly. I don't know why that was the 100 levels, but it was. And then the other one was Java, and learning patterns of programming and having like some more structured, because before then it was all IT stuff that I was learning from other people, and programming I was only self-taught. I bought a PHP book, but some of the concepts, like I needed a tutor to kind of like help me, or not necessarily like tutor per se, but I needed someone that was more experienced to help me bridge some of the gaps in my understanding. When I got to the university, I found that there, and I was able to get just those couple of missing links that, like, once you understand them, once somebody, whiteboards or chalkboards it with you, who's knowledgeable, or, you're able to ask a couple questions in class that like the little tiny things that are huge roadblocks. But once you understand that one tiny thing, then boom, you're just unbounded and unleashed.
Yep.
And so I just started learning more and more on my own. I quickly started learning Python because everybody talked about Python, but then I found out about Ruby. Rails was getting really hot at that time. It was like Rails 2.0. So I was really into that. Then
it's funny though, you talk about some of this stuff, you got into IT, going to BYU, going on a mission, all of these things are things that I identify with as well, because I went on my mission to Italy and then came back, went to BYU. I studied computer engineering at BYU, not computer science. But I worked in the office of IT, setting up servers and all this stuff. And so it's interesting to me to listen to and say, oh, yeah, I remember going through some of this stuff. I did take a bunch of computer science classes at BYU because that was part of the computer engineering major. But yeah, it's just interesting coming into that. And then, yeah, you're talking about getting into Ruby, which is, I think, where we got to know each other was in the Ruby community initially.
Probably. I mean, did you go to the meetups at Mosey?
Yes.
That's probably where we met. And that's where I learned about Node. That there was do you remember there being a guy with kind of like a funny hat that would come sometimes?
No.
Okay, never mind. But
was that you?
No. There was a guy that like I didn't see him long enough to know what he was all about, and I didn't ask a question. I thought it was maybe just a goofy thing, but it might have been a religious thing. I don't know. But he had like I remember the hat was weird. I think it had a tassel on it, and it was like small, kind of like a Boo has in Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, if I remember, it was something like that, but my memory could be completely wrong. Anyway.
I seem to have a vague recollection of something like that.
I want to say, oh gosh, his name is escaping me right now, but the guy that started in Structure, I think he might have been the first one that mentioned Node during one of his presentations. And that's how I got on the Node path.
Interesting.
And then I started the Utah JavaScript users group, and we had a couple of meetings and then merged with a couple of guys that were doing an internal thing at their office, which is now Domo. It was before it was Corda. And so they had started doing something simultaneously. So within about a month of each other, we both had started. And so I said, hey, I've got like a couple hundred people on this mailing list. I like your name better. Utah.js just sounds better than Utah.js user group.
Yeah.
So why don't we, we kind of talked, we'll just pull it together. And so that became Utah.js. And back then, I was struggling through the same problems that everybody struggles through when they first come to JavaScript. Like, how is it that I'm calling this function on line 12 and there's not a solution for it on line 15? That async confusion. And then I started working. Somebody wanted some side work done. It started out as IT stuff, but then quickly moved into programming.
Uh-huh.
I dropped out of school because I was kind of bored. Like I was already kind of considering like maybe going to a technical school instead. Like there's a couple like Newmont University and Steven Seneca around here. So I was already considering that because just as much as the university was like awesome social life and like I love the springboard that it gave me, it just wasn't focused to my style of learning. Mm-hmm. And I'd never really wanted a degree. It was something that my parents and my grandparents kind of always spoke like, well, of course you'll go to college and get a degree, Of
course.
And so when I was there, I just really didn't feel like school was for me, and I wanted a way out. And when I started working this job part-time, and then later they were like, okay, well, we want to hire you. And I was like, I don't know if that's the right thing for me to do. Maybe I should finish school. But I'd already kind of been several times on the fence. And so I was like, okay, if you give me the same that a college graduate would get as my salary, which was way below what I was worth, by the way, but again, like happy college student, had no idea, I'll do it. And so then I worked and I don't begrudge them at all for that. I think that, as a startup, you want to find those bright people that are coming out of high school and college that are worth, like a mid-level developer, but you're getting them at the cost of a college student. Like you want to do that, and that's fair. It works out for people. It helps grow opportunities. So I don't begrudge that at all. And they probably wouldn't have had the money to pay me what I was worth at that time. But it was.
I could argue the point, but keep talking.
Well, anyway, it was so exciting. It was so exciting, and I loved it so much. Like I just don't regret it at all.
Wasn't that the radar company that you worked at?
Yes. And that's where I first saw, because we had a bunch of different boards that we prototyped on to try to test things out and see like what limits we could push. Because we were taking radar data, which is like sonar or an ultrasound or, like any of that ADAR technology. So we basically beamed out what was, I think it was more or less like a Wi-Fi A type signal. I think it might have been 10. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say what it was anyway, but we were doing something that I think was in the public band. Mm-hmm. And so basically it's just light that you can't see that goes out and bounces back. And then we would try to visualize it. And I got us from, we used to have it so that you had to plug in a composite cable. And I was like, hey, I think that with today's technology, Firefox had taken the world by storm and was so innovative with so many new cool features. And I was like, I bet that we could get this working in Firefox where we send a small image to the browser several times a second. And instead of having this go out on a composite cable and a crappy display, like we could maybe overlay this on Google Maps. And so that's what we did. Like, it was amazing. We got everything. It was progressive. You know, it started out, we just took the crappy images that we were sending over composite that were like these really crude images that we first converted that. Then we separated that out into like the data versus because the data was in the image. That was the only way to get the data originally when I got there. But then we separated out the data into JSON and XML and some of these military formats. And I mean, anyway, that's when I first saw a tiny computer. It was a Gumsticks was one of these things that came out around that time. And then that was a precursor to the Raspberry Pi. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, one day we'll have servers in people's homes and there'll be tiny little things that just sit on your desk, like about the size of a conventional hard drive today. And that will be like the future. And that's when, and then the Raspberry Pi came out and the price was like a 10x difference where, you know, a Gumsticks might run you $200 to $300. A Raspberry Pi was $25 to $35. Yeah. And it was like, this is not just something that like could happen. Like, this is going to happen. Now it still hasn't happened yet, but that's what, you know, my goal is transitioned into, is to bring ownership and like real, you know, internet connectivity between people that trust each other. Mm-hmm. You know, to be able to have a device in my house, a device in your house. And because we trust each other, we can, you know, that nothing's ever going to be like direct. We're not going to have a line of sight connection or anything, but we can have with encryption, any connection that goes from one encrypted point to another encrypted point is now a peer connection. It's a private channel connection. So anyway, that's what I want to see. And a lot of that spark. I mean, that was something I was working on even back in high school. I had that problem. Like, there's this XKCD of, you know, want to send a file from one person to another. Even internet experts are still stumped because it's so like, it's like you always have to upload it to somebody else's server for someone to download it. It should
right.
Just be able to open up a thing. I'm like, and that's what Telebit, like going back to Telebit, that Telebit is all part of this thing. You know, you install it on a computer or a device, and then you give somebody a URL. Boom! Now you can share a file. So anyway, that's kind of bringing things full circle. I guess, well, not even full circle, linearly up to about where I am now, with maybe a couple missing pieces and jumps. But it's kind of my story.
Right. So you ran into Node at a Ruby meetup. I just want to back up a little bit. What was it that made you make the transition? Because it seems like people come into different technologies, and I'm not going to defend or knock any particular technology, but you know, they come in and they try, you know, they work in one technology and it's like, this is nice. And they work in another technology, this is really nice. And then work in another technology, and it's like, oh my gosh, I love this. Yeah,
that's kind of what happened to me. Okay, like, and it started with jQuery. Like, I was like, you know, all this Rails stuff is cool, but what if we just, and this is the acronym single page application was not a thing, okay? When I told people my thoughts on this, they looked at me like I was an idiot. I was like, well, what if you just use the JavaScript on the front end and communicate to the back end with an API and JSON? Like, why not just do that? And so I was like prototyping these little applications with jQuery, where I was like trying to wrangle Rails to not serve HTML, but to use JSON instead, which it had support for, but not like, you know, everything has today. Like, it was kind of more, I would say, new / experimental.
Yeah.
I mean, it was there, but there were problems that I ran into that were difficult to solve because of how Rails has layers upon layers upon layers. I actually one of the things I was building was a music player, and I ended up submitting a patch to Rails, which I was too young at the time, or too inexperienced rather. You know, you're never too young, but I didn't understand quite how things were supposed to work with the, you know, the diff sign-offs and stuff like that. GitHub wasn't around yet, or if it was like very small. So to get Core's support, because Core's had just come out and a few browsers supported it. But anyway, so I was just loving the front end, not because I love the front end. Like, I don't really like CSS or HTML, but JavaScript was just so light and so simple, and it just allowed you to do things in such a flexible way. So, like, I learned so much education-wise in terms of like learning Java at school, getting introduced to Python to see, like, you know, Python really has this mentality of like configuration being explicit, which is just great. And the Ruby's like beautiful, but in the opposite direction where everything's convention and there's just lots of layers, which is sometimes beautiful and sometimes terrible. And then Node was just, it was new and it was exciting. And I think one of the things I really liked about it was, the idea of having code in the browser and on the server. And then Node was just really lightweight and portable. Like, go and try to install Ruby. I mean, I'm sure it's a better story today, but like back then, you try to install Ruby on a system and you have to follow like 7 different guides and like figure out which version's compatible with what version, and nothing ever worked. Like you'd go to an open source project, get the code, set it up on your computer, and like nothing works. But Node was like so small. It's just this little binary, and then, these little bunches of files and Node modules. And it didn't require C compiler to get it going. The very few things in Node, even back then, required a C compiler.
That's fair. It did have compatibility issues similar to what you were talking about with Ruby, but yes, yeah. And the other thing is Node went out of its way to make sure that it was supported on some platforms that Ruby in general didn't prioritize.
Yeah, so like I had to do some work to get it working on ARM devices.
Node or Ruby?
Node.
Okay.
But I was like, when I first started at SpotRF, I was going to try to get Ruby Event Machine, because I'd watched this excellent talk on Ruby Event Machine, and I was like, oh, cool! Like this is, this would make a web server so great. I just barely started trying to get Ruby set up on some of our prototype devices to be able to be that, JSON web server. So we'd have like this super like ultra modern, which now is like what everybody has. So I feel so validated that I made the right choice that has ended up being really hugely successful for them and their partners. But like using the JSON API, but then there was problems I was running into with Ruby, and it was like ridiculously slow. And the Node was just kind of zippy, and there were definitely problems with Node and ARM at that time. In fact, I think there probably still are. But we were able to get product out the door. And there were like some times where there was there was one December. It was probably the 2nd December that I was working there. And it was like all hands on deck. We were there from morning until, 10, 11, 12 at night, busting our butts to get something so we could meet a contract so that we could all not lose our jobs come January.
Oh, man.
So that's back to that thing of like, they may not have had the money to pay me at that time. Like really they were running on a budget. The guy that owned it, I'm pretty sure that he was taking like next to nothing, in terms of salary that we were getting paid, and he was probably running some credit cards at the time. I don't know for sure, but I can only imagine. Anyway, sorry, now I'm getting a little jumbled and mixing stories, but lead me in the right direction again, Chuck. Ask me another question.
No, it's all good. So you get into Node. At what point does this idea of a home server and Node and everything start to come together? Because I know that you worked on it. You had a startup that worked on it. There was an exit from the startup. I don't know how much of all of this you want to talk about, but it seems like everything was kind of coming together around some of these ideas. And I'm wondering at what point they started to gel and how it all sort of connects up now for you.
It has been a very long process. It really started back in high school when I wanted to send a picture to my mom, and I had like this pause moment where I couldn't figure out what the right way to do it, because we were sitting across I was in my room and she was in the living room. So we're like 20 feet away. And the question that caused me to like halt, because I couldn't make a quick decision. It seemed like I should be able to, but I couldn't, was like, how do I get this picture to my mom? And because I had to stop and think like, well, like I could upload it to Flickr, because I don't know if Dropbox was a thing yet, but Flickr, I'm pretty sure was around at that time. So I was like, well, maybe I can upload it to Flickr to send it to her. Or, well, like I have this PHP album software that I'm running. Maybe I could give her the IP address, or I could put it on a USB drive, or I could send it through email. And it's like all of these things were like convenient if it's like, okay, I want to send this to somebody over in China, half the world away. All of them are like really convenient. But it's like, right. I want to give this to somebody that's in the next room from me. Then all of them seem like really overkill and inconvenient.
Right.
And so that was part of the genesis, was just like wanting to share a photo and being like, there should be a way that the computer that I have that has all this capability that I built myself, that's so powerful, and with my ability to create things with programming, like there should be a way that without my mom having to do anything special, I should be able to speak, and just by speaking, she should be able to get access to the picture. And by speaking, I don't mean that I say, computer, send picture to my mom. I meant that like the way to do it should be so simple that I should be able to communicate it in just a few words.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, like open this app, click AJ, like that's kind of what I was envisioning. At the time, the web was not powerful like it is today. So like I wasn't even really thinking necessarily a web server. I was thinking maybe some sort of desktop application that would do the function of like what Facebook is. But like web stuff, the web wasn't super capable back then. But it morphed over time. So I had other experiences like that. And I just kind of have always followed that trajectory of learning because all those things are interesting to me. Devices are interesting to me. I mean, I worked at this radar company. It was excellent.
Right.
But it followed that trajectory. Another thing that came up was when my sister and we were sharing an iTunes account, and iTunes Match just came out. So I paid for it right away because I was like, oh, this is great. But, of course, who would think that someone's enthusiastic about music and willing to pay for it would have more than, a couple thousand songs. So I signed up for the iTunes Match, and then immediately within like 2 hours, I think it was about that long, it pops up and it says like, you're over the quota for how much music you can sync. And I was like, oh, that's dumb. But some of it, like, probably half my library was synced or something. And so my sister logs in and she sees like all the music is available. So she starts to download some of it and then play it. And she's in the living room with my mom and starts playing You're Beautiful by James Blunt. And in the official version, that's not the version you get from the Now CD or the radio, but like the quote unquote legit version, it says the F word somewhere in the middle of the song. And so my sister calls me up and she's all upset because she's like, I'm sitting in, because she's a young teenager at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I was playing your music in the living room with mom and the F word came on, what's up? And it even says radio edit in the title. And we found out that what iTunes did was it synced all the metadata, but it didn't sync the actual data. So, we thought that she was getting a copy of my version of the song and she wasn't. And so that was just like a reinforcement of like, because I'm a collector, because I'm someone that cares about my digital stuff. Like I care about my movies and my music. They're important to me. And I do choose to edit some of my music sometimes. And if it weren't so darn inconvenient, I'd probably edit movies sometimes too. And plus I probably don't rewatch movies as frequently as I re-listen to music. But like I like that aspect of ownership, and I just felt like there really needs to be an avenue for this. So all of these things, just experiences here and there. And I, again, like I was talking to more people about it, and to this day, people still give me stupid looks when I say that, one day everybody's going to have a server in their home. Just like when I was talking about single page applications and people just give me stupid looks like, why would you ever want to do that? So I still believe that it's very much something that's happening in the future. And you're starting to see things like Helm is one of the companies. There's like 2 or 3 of them. Lima was one that I don't think quite met the promise of what I'm looking for. Helm looks like it's starting small and might have big potential. There's a couple other ones, but like there are other people out there that are really into ownership, and then a lot of media coverage about privacy. Although I don't think that the average person cares about convenience much more than they care about privacy. And so I think the convenience of accessing stuff that you own, targeting people that have like backup drives and stuff like that, is really where that market's going to emerge. It's not going, I don't think that it's actually going to emerge out of privacy concerns. I think privacy concerns will help get media boost to some of these projects, but I don't think people are going to change their purchasing decisions based on privacy concerns, because it's cool to talk about, but when you got to put the dollar down, I don't think people really care as much as we'd hope that they'd care.
Right.
And by the way, the name of the new company, we're right in the middle of changing names, but it is Root, and it is therootcompany.com.
Cool. That's what you're working on today?
Well, it is what I'm working on these days. Today, I'm working on Big Squid stuff, and took a break to talk with you. But after hours today, one of the things that I'm working on, and this is so cool, but something no JavaScript, I just do stuff JavaScript developers don't do, right? But so CSRs, certificate signing requests, are what you need to be able to do things like Let's Encrypt, or the old traditional, go to some expensive SSL provider.com. And, typically, you got to...
I've done both. Yep.
Yeah. So they're in a format called ASN1. And there are libraries for this in JavaScript. There's PKI.js, ASN1.js, Forge.js, and a couple other ones around these certificate standards. The problem is they're so darn big, and the cross-library compatibility is really low because some of them were made using binary strings. Some of them take advantage of array buffers. Some of them use different big int libraries. And so in order to get them to work together, to get them to do a full loop of what you want, you have to mix and match them and create these little compatibility layers where you translate, well, I get it in base 64 from this one, but I have to pass it as a big int to that one. And there's all these concerns you have to worry about. And so I've had some trouble in getting the support that I want in both the browser version of Greenlock as well as the Node version of Greenlock. I mean, it works great. I don't want to put down, I love my product. I think that lots of other people, I know that lots of other people are downloading it and using it. I get positive feedback on it. So, but there's some things that don't work as well as they could. So it's not that it's broken, but it's like, I want it to be better and have fewer dependencies and support more things.
Right.
So I actually really dug in this past week to the ASN1 format, which is basically, you can kind of think of it like a mix of XML and XLST. So XML and schemas of XML, or like JSON and JSON.org that defines like first name. Is that first underscore name, first camel case name, or all lowercase first name? So it's a binary format that specifies things like that. Like how do you send some data in a way that the other system can understand it, even though you can pick a lot of arbitrary stuff or arbitrary things. Anyway, right. I've been working in that. So I've been doing reverse engineering, even though there's docs available. But in order to understand the docs, you kind of have to like be able to look at the binary formats and like look at them with a hex diff. I've been using hexfiend. And then, kind of see like, okay, if I generate a certificate with example.com, this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to generate it with example.net, and I'm going to do a binary diff of the two. Okay, now I can see every place where example.com was referenced. Also, I can see where the length parameters are because those are highlighted, and I can see that, okay, when I add one character extra over here, it affects all
right.
of them. So And I'm doing all of this in JavaScript, and I've come up with a really stupid solution that is actually incredibly efficient and works really well, which is basically make a binary template out of hex strings and then insert the things that need to go in the places they need to go.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to push us over to the next segment of the show, which is picks. But before we do that, where do people find you online besides JavaScript Jabber?
Oh, goodness. So I am cool AJ86 everywhere you want to be. So, you can hit me up on Pinterest. I won't see it if you hit me up on Pinterest because I probably haven't logged into that in a year. But you can hit me up anywhere. You just type CoolAge86 into whatever platform you're on, and I'll be there. Gmail, Twitter, etc. And then if you're into more low-level stuff, like if you're into security, if you're into devices, I just put a sign-up button on my blog. And I'm going to start, I just did it, but I want to start this newsletter thing. So if you go to coolage86.com and you'll see just a boatload of articles on different topics. If you've got something kind of low level like that and you just do a Command F on the blog tab, you'll probably run into something cool. So that's another avenue. And then therootcompany.com again is the company that's doing Greenlock, Telebit, and what we're right now calling Hub, but the name of that may change, which is the home server.
Awesome. Well, let's do some picks. What do you want to shout out about?
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Oh man, Chuck, I'm so bad about this. Either I'm full of them and I forget them, or I haven't thought about it at all. So one thing I'm going to pick is jcpenney.com. If you are tall like me, I'm going to give you some secrets and you are going to love me for this. All right. So this is for us that are either tall or have long torsos. You can go on jcpenney.com and you can get shirts that will fit you. If you're big and tall, you want to shop Van Heusen. A 16.5 neck on there fits me like a boat. Now, if you're a little slenderer, you want Stafford. I find a 16.5 is a little bigger than what I need. Now, I'm 240 pounds and 6'5", so that kind of gives you an idea of my body proportions. The Staffords fit well and they've got room to breathe. I can't, right now, I've got a little bit of extra weight on me. I can't fit into a J. Ferrar 16.5, but the 17 fits just perfect. And if I lose a little bit of weight, I'll fit into the 16 again. By fit, because the how far it goes around your belly is measured at the neck size. So if you're really slender, the 16.5 is low as you can go on button-up shirts. I've been talking this whole time about button-up shirts because I like button-up shirts. So anyway, I highly recommend JCPenney. J. Ferrar is what I like to buy for my button-ups. And then Stafford is my number 2 because those sizes fit. And I get the length that I need. I get the 38-inch arms. They've got 37, 38, 39, like stuff that's in that range. So if you got long arms and you're tall, that's going to be my biggest pick. And then also along the side of clothes, Express. They've got this 4-way stretch jeans that are very flattering. So you can get a little bit smaller than what your actual size is and fit into them. But they're just amazingly comfortable. I had some shirts and jeans wear out recently and I had to go shopping. And so that's why this is on my mind. And then also another thing I'm going to pick, which I picked on JavaScript Jabber, but I just love this so much. Chris Ferdinandi, who is on JavaScript Jabber with us, he has this gomakethings.com newsletter. And that's actually what inspired me to start being more active on my blog again and to start doing a newsletter was just how great he does it and me wanting to aspire to that. But he's all about vanilla JS, like plain, simple JavaScript. And he just gives excellent tips each week. I love reviewing it. I'm a very opinionated person, and there's, of course, things that I disagree with him on. But for the most part, I think he's just so good about keeping it simple and showing you like, hey, you don't need 6 gigabytes of npm install hello world app to be able to, do things that you need to do in a browser. You can keep it simple and use the APIs that are already available to you.
Awesome. So I guess one pick that I can throw out there, and this is something that I'm trying to get set up on devchat.tv. We use WordPress at devchat.tv, and there's a plugin called King Sumo that allows us to do contests. And basically it's giveaway contests. So you enter your email and then, we'll send you free stuff if you win. And, it allows you to do sharing on social and things like that. And so I'm really looking forward to setting some of that up. And the things that we're setting up right now we've had some authors on JavaScript Jabber or Adventures in Angular recently. And some of them are from Manning, and they've sent us some access codes for the books to give away to our listeners. And I thought that would just be a cool way to give them away. It's like, hey, just put your email address in and we'll tell you if you won. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. Another tool that I'm using on the back end to manage the list is Drip, and that's at getdrip.com. I think they also have like drip.com or drip.co or something at this point too. So anyway, those are the things that I'm using there. And one other thing I'm going to shout out about is I've been working on this Get a Job book probably for the last 3 months. And I just finished sort of the basic rough draft is what I'm calling it. And the reason I'm calling it the basic rough draft was in order to get into the groove to write, I would just basically sit down and just crank out all of the basic information I wanted in the book and not worry about whether or not I could remember the specific example I used for each thing. And so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some experiences that I've had and some experiences that other folks have had. And I also need to work on some things tying the different ideas in the book together. The system that I've been using, or that I signed up for a book authoring course, and you can find that at self-publishingschool.com. And I have an affiliate code for that, and I'd really appreciate you if you went and used that instead. There will be a link in the show notes for that. And then the other tool that I've been using is Softcover, and that's softcover.io. It only really works on Mac. I haven't seen it work on Windows or Linux. But anyway, I write my book in Markdown, and then I run a little Ruby script, and it converts it to PDF, Mobi, and what's the other one? EPUB. So anyway, good stuff there. You can find the details at softcover.io. If you go check it out there, just keep in mind that they also sell books. You can publish through them or self-publish through them. That's not what I intend to do. You can also just get details on the tool. So anyway, those are my picks. AJ, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Man, it's good to relive some of those early memories. I got so happy while I was talking with you. I wish people could see the smile on my face. And I hope yours as you're recounting your own story, or younger and going through these things. Just have a good time and learn a lot, and hope you have those experiences you can look back on and just smile about the cool stuff you did that no one else was doing, or the mistakes you made that other people weren't willing to make yet.
Yep. Yeah, it's fun to think back on that stuff. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up, and we will catch everyone next week.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.